This whole channel is about local history, local being wherever I happen to be. And so I made up my mind early that if I could go somewhere and do a story there, that's what I was going to do. Well, we went to the mountains, Smoky Mountains, and I searched the internet and I could not find anything other than how Maggie Valley was named. I couldn't find anything of any notoriety, anything that I thought would just spark interest. So while we were in Bryson City, North Carolina, I visited the cultural center there. It's the old courthouse. They've changed it to a county museum, basically. And sure enough, I ran across the story of Major Redmond. Now, this is a pretty interesting story, and I'm just going to give you the short version because I can't give you the long without notes. He was born in 1850s. In the Civil War, he ran around Civil War Confederate camps, and he got the name Major from soldiers, like Little Major, Lewis Redmond, and the name just stuck with him. Well, then in his early 20s, so he got to making moonshine, and it was supposed to be really good moonshine. And then he started selling moonshine for other people so they could pay their taxes on their land, because after the Civil War, during Reconstruction, the federal government would take your land, they would raise your taxes and take your land for their own purposes. So the Appalachian people, being mountain people, being very resilient and stubborn people, decided that they were going to take the moonshine that they were making anyway, the illegally distilled liquors, and sell it. Mr. Redmond, Major Lewis Redmond, became their go-between guy to sell it. He had a confrontation with a guy named Duckworth. This was a federal law officer who said he had a warrant for his arrest. Supposedly, Mr. Duckworth had a gun on him, or pointed a gun at Redmond. And Redmond said, "Look, if you put down the gun, I'll go with you, but you quit pointing that gun at me." And so Duckworth agreed to put down the gun, at which time Duckworth put down the gun. Redmond come out with his Derringer and shot him. I don't know how many times, but he shot him in the throat once. And the gold button he was wearing pushed back up through the throat, and that's what killed Duckworth. Now, you see, Duckworth and Redmond had gone to school together. They were friends when they were younger. But Duckworth took a path of a traitor, basically. In the South, if you worked for the federal government, you were a traitor. You were looked down on as a scoundrel. And as one lady said, if you were killed, it was no loss to the South. So now Major Lewis Redmond is in serious trouble, and the law is after him. So he goes from Bryson City, North Carolina, moves to Seneca, North Carolina, stays there a little while, and then comes back to Bryson City, or the county of Bryson City, where that's located, Swain County. And a couple times he almost got caught. He got wind that the law was coming ahead of time. He was able to escape. But one time he wasn't so lucky. He come out of his cabin. He was surrounded by the law. He flinched. They shot him a bunch of times. I've heard as many as 18 times, but I believe the correct number is 6. That seems to be more realistic, and more credible sources say 6. 6 times is a lot of times to be shot, though. And he went down. Had he died, he'd be more famous than Billy the Kid is now, because back then he was. They wrote news articles about him in the North and in the South. In the South, he was a hero. In the North, he was a scoundrel. So he went down. But he lived, so they arrested him. And I believe that was 1881. They arrested him. He went to prison. Now, this is pretty interesting. They didn't charge him with the murder of Duckworth. No. They charged him with his liquor stuff, his distillery, illegal, and all that stuff, but not the murder of Duckworth. And I'll get back to that in a couple minutes. So he goes to prison. He's only in 3 years, and he gets out by presidential pardon. Turns out that Wade Hampton of South Carolina pushed for his release, a presidential pardon, on humanitarian grounds. Because many times he'd been shot, they said that he was not in good shape, and the humane thing was just to let him out of prison, which they did. I got a feeling Garfield did this to garner votes from the South, too. I'm sure it was politically motivated, which, by the way, I didn't mention in the other film. So anyway, he gets out. Strange twist of things happen. The government hires him to do what? To run a government-ran distillery. That's right. Government-ran distillery in Seneca, South Carolina, because that's where he ended up settling at. And so he runs his distillery, which made terrible liquor, but he showed him how to make good liquor, and he ran it. He died at the age of 51 years old in 1906. Don't know what he died from. 51 is awful young to die, though. I don't know, might have been complications from being shot, even though it's 20 years later. You know, we just never know, I guess, about these kind of things. And the funny thing is, the irony is that on his tombstone in Seneca, South Carolina, by the way, he's buried in a Baptist church graveyard. A moonshiner, person who killed someone from the law, unrepentant as far as his moonshine ways are concerned, because he still ran a distillery, buried in a Baptist church graveyard, and on his tombstone it says he was the sunshine of our life. I think that's just a take on the fact that he made moonshine. So let's get back to the story of Duckworth. The descendants of Redmond are still alive, and Redmond is real famous in his area now. And one of his great granddaughters wrote a blog. And this is what she said. Now, this is what she said. I don't know if it's true or not. This is what she said. She said that Redmond and Duckworth were both smitten, I guess you could say, and both wanted Redmond's wife. Now, this is before they were married. And she obviously went with Redmond. But Duckworth didn't like this, confronted her about this, and brutally raped her. So I'm assuming Redmond was just waiting for the right time, and he found the right time whenever Duckworth pulled a gun on him, and he was able to talk him into putting it down. So anyway, it's a really interesting story. I was intrigued by it. I hope the story is coming across as good to you as it is in my mind. Now again, you've listened to this one without notes. I did the other one with notes. And just watch them both, and in the comments below, tell me what you think. Y'all have a good day.